Hello, I'm Mark Staples, and I'm the moderator for a continuing series of legislative candidate interviews for those seeking to either return, in our guest today's case, or challenge for the right to go to the Montana legislature starting in January in Helena 2009. My guest this afternoon is a current representative from HD 95, Diane Sands. Diane, welcome.
Thank you, Mark.
Her opponent, Kevin Blackler, was invited, but obviously was unable to attend. So Diane, we'll have a nice chance to chat. Why don't, for those in Missoula, those few in Missoula who may not know you, why don't you give us a little of your, the viewing audience, some of your personal background?
Thank you, Mark, and thanks to Bresnan for inviting us all to do it. It's really an important part of the democratic process, I think, is to make sure that the constituents out there who are voters actually get to know something about us, and I know that can be hard sometimes. And I'm sure I don't know everyone in Missoula yet, but I'm working on it. I grew up in Montana. I was born in St. Ignatius and grew up in eastern Montana with a family of teachers and ranchers, and graduated from Fraser up on the Fort Peck Indian Reservation, which I consider to be home, but I've been here in Missoula since 1965. I'm a graduate of the University of Montana, and I've spent most of my life working on different human services issues, from everything from domestic violence to being a founder and executive director of the Partnership Health Center, to working on employment issues for women, to doing just a variety of those kinds of programs. I'm currently employed as the development director for the Historical Museum at Fort Missoula. And so we do a lot of community work and education to make sure that people understand the heritage that we have here in western Montana. I'm running for my third term for the legislature and looking forward to it.
You know, in the last couple of days, it's been an odd juxtaposition of national news versus Montana news. And obviously the topic du jour at the national level is the meltdown of the financial system and the ramifications that are threatened if we don't achieve some sort of bailout or whatever they chose to call it. Meanwhile, the economists in Montana are saying we've avoided it. If for the most part, our financial institutions are solid. We don't seem to have these massive dips. We could have some problems, and I'd like to ask you, from the perspective of an incumbent legislature and one who may be going back in January, is there something we have done right that has helped us to avoid this kind of meltdown in Montana, or are we apt to still see it? And if we have done something right, how can we continue to sustain it? And if we need to improve Montana's economy, how do we accomplish that?
That's a great question, and that's what many of the voters on the doors are asking me every day. It's the #1 topic people have, and certainly because we're doing this interview on the 1st of October, the whole situation nationally may change by tomorrow, and I expect that it will, and we don't really know what that proposal is going to look like should something pass in Congress. I believe we still live in a world economy and that we really aren't immune from whatever is happening nationally and clearly internationally, although we tend historically to be at the end of the line of either the positives or the negatives of these kinds of changes. The biggest change that I hear from the people that I'm talking to day to day is just plain out and out fear, #1, that they are afraid that it will affect us whether or not, in fact, it does. They're concerned about their own savings. They're concerned about their retirement accounts. And we haven't really seen whether they're going to be impacted or how much thus far. So that, I think, remains yet to be seen. The other real anger is about sort of the lack of oversight and accountability. And I can relate to that on one level because I served in the 1997 session when energy deregulation happened in the state of Montana, and I was one of the people who voted against it, which clearly weren't the majority because it happened. And because of that lack of oversight in that area, we went from having among the lowest energy rates in the region to having among the highest energy rates. So I do think there is an important national public policy issue and one for the state to look at, is what kind of oversight do we have of these major institutions in our society that affect all of our lives, even though they are private businesses.
As of yesterday, the Revenue and Transportation Interim Committee guesstimated to the best of their ability, that we might have a $300 to $400 million surplus if you get back to this session. If in fact that's there, and that's the proposition here. If it's there, any priorities for spending it, saving it, giving it back, investing it?
Excellent question. $300 to $400 million is not a huge amount of money, actually, although it seems like a lot to me personally. But I think what we did last time is a reasonable guideline for it, to invest maybe a third of it. We have some needs, such as particularly in the areas of education, healthcare, things of those sort. We could return part of it. I think that's always a reasonable thing to do. And we could save part of it. We certainly have no idea what's going to be the really long-term impacts of this federal and international economic crisis. So it might be the prudent thing to do to save some of it. And I would be very much interested in playing it safe in that regard, and perhaps saving more of it than we might otherwise have done. I also think it's important to spend part of it on investing in Montana. For example, in the area of education, we really do need to invest more in our K-12 system. We need to invest in the colleges of technology at the higher ed level, because those really are investments in good jobs for our kids in the future of Montana. So those would be two of my priorities.
With those priorities, would the spending have to come in from the current surplus to pass muster with you, or would you, if it wasn't sufficient, say for instance on school funding, and it wasn't to the level that you personally felt is adequate, would you support increasing other revenue sources, i.e. taxes, in order to fill up the gap, or do you believe that we would have to do it within whatever the surplus was?
I agree with the governor on this very much. At this point, I think there is no reason for us to be looking at increasing taxes in the state, that we should be able to figure out how to live within our means. Unless, of course, the revenue projections, which can change fairly rapidly, end up showing that we have some kind of a deficit, and we have to deal with that issue, which is very different than having a modest surplus, which is really excess revenues, which is what we're really talking about here. So I believe we should make the adjustments, and that's why we go there. Those are hard decisions to make. I used to spend a lot of the time in appropriations, basically where you play Solomon and you cut the baby into pieces. And that's our job, and that's why we go there. And so I think we can live within our means.
The cities expressed disappointment that over the past several bienniums, when Montana was relatively flush for Montana's experience, that they were not recipients of these good times, and because of growth in their communities, they don't have the funds to meet their obligations, both infrastructure-wise, service-wise, and they want, for lack of a better term, an option. And the option they want is to take to the voters of each of their communities a proposal for a sales tax on quote-unquote luxury items in most cases. In most cases, those turn out to be alcohol by the drink, prepared meals, and lodging, and other recreational activities that tourists are likely to engage in. Right now, that's limited to resorts, those communities that achieve a resort designation. They want to expand that to all communities, to have the right to take to the voters the option for a local option sales tax. Thoughts?
Well, that's a hot topic to discuss. Actually, I think I differ from many of my Democratic colleagues in that I really believe that a local option tax, however it might be constructed, which is the devil's in the details, should be an option for Montana communities. We already allow it for resort areas, as you said, and that money is really important to the tourism industry in the state of Montana. I believe that we should trust the people at the local level. We at the state level frequently complain about how at the federal level they make decisions about what we should be doing in Montana, and we're perfectly capable of making those decisions for ourselves. So I do believe, depending on how it's constructed, what it covers, who's charged what the limits are, that we should look seriously at a local option tax.
At the same time, would you support or do you oppose a general sales tax that doesn't go from community to community at the option of those people, but is just a sales tax statewide?
I don't think that's going to happen, number one. I think the sales tax issue is one that Montana's made the decision on more than once, that by vote of the people, that we are not doing a sales tax. So I think it really is not on the table, no matter how any individual person might feel about it. And personally, I am not totally opposed to a sales tax, which definitely is not the position of most of the Democrats. But other states have them, and they don't seem to have destroyed the moral fiber or the economy of those states. I think it's a matter of balancing different revenue sources, and that having as many different income sources that capture as many different kinds of revenue. It's like diversifying your personal account these days in the midst of the kind of economic situation that we're in. And I think the state could do that. But I don't think it's a topic that's going to come up this session in any serious way. The public has spoken on it. I think we need to move on.
Okay. You know, as an interesting aside, among friends who've studied the political process for years, and it wouldn't be my place to have a position about something that large, or any position as the moderator of this, but I do find it curious that as you look at that sales tax issue, and I found it interesting, you say, well, this would be out of step with my party to say I don't see it as the absolute devil. In a lot of states, it's the Republicans who oppose sales taxes and the Democrats who embrace them, and it's just reversed in Montana.
Well,
so
and that's
it's
how
an interesting phenomenon.
I initially believed that sales taxes were, evil and completely discriminatory. And I don't think it's the world's most fair tax, but most of our taxes do hit different populations in different ways. And I am concerned about its impact on low-income people. But when I was running the Montana Women's Lobby, which lobbied the legislature for families and children's issues for about a dozen years, and I worked with other states, and those organizations in other states were, in many cases, supportive of a sales tax because it provided the revenue to serve the people's needs around health care and human services. So I had to really seriously look at how they're used. And again, I don't think it's going to be an issue in the next session, but I do not have a closed opinion on that topic.
I apologize. I have led you astray. You know, when there's only one person to talk to, sometimes I get into this informal mode, and I did lead you into a place that is really not going to be a topic at the legislature.
Yeah,
I think
but I am going to
I think
get
that's
mail.
a closed.
I am going to get mail.
I think that's a closed topic.
It is.
For the record, Representative Sands is not espousing a sales tax, and has not, and will not, and it won't be an issue. We were talking about local option sales tax, and if you get mail on that, then that's what
it's
you're
for.
on TV about. Speaking of things that are important to you, rather than the places I may take you aside, what are some of your, and I'll give you a chance to close, and I thank you for coming. What are something of your passions? In particular, you're an incumbent. If you're reelected, you got some things in mind that you specifically want to take, accomplish, defend against, or support in this upcoming legislature?
Thank you for that question. Yes, I have several. I do serve on the Health and Human Services Committee and have served on it for 2 sessions now, and I'm on the interim committee that deals with issues of health care. Particularly, we're dealing with both the provision of mental health services in the state of Montana. I intend to carry the committee bills that come out to provide some grant funding for EMS and EMT services, which are at a critical issue in particularly rural Montana, where if there isn't someone there when you have a heart attack, you may not make it as far as the hospital. So those are very important issues to me. I intend to work on other health-related issues, such as the expansion of funds for community health centers, which I understand the importance of because they provide care to really almost 100,000 people in the state of Montana. I'll be supporting the CHIP amendment, which will provide expanded health care coverage for children in the state. So those are just some of the health care issues. Other topics that I have worked on most of my career include election issues. I carried the bills that have to do with allowing counties to have all elections by mail, vote by mail. I believe the evidence shows in Oregon and other states, and even in Montana elections, that more people vote if you just mail them the ballot and then it's up to them to fill it out and return it instead of waiting for that last day and hoping they make it to the ballot. So that's an important one for me. I'll also be working on some of the other ethics bills in the legislature that I worked on last time, particularly the defining and restricting of funds that go into what we call constituency accounts, which really are elected officials' so-called slush funds, but making sure that they're transparent, legitimate, that the public knows how we get our money and how we spend our money. And then I'll be carrying a number of local government bills as well.
Well, you know, they say in politics that if you're asking for support financially, you have to make the ask. And if you're asking for a vote, you have to make the ask. And since we're wrapping this up, I'm going to give you a few seconds
Great.
to make the ask for support.
Thank you. And again, I appreciate the chance to visit with the voters via this medium. I do ask for your support if you live in House District 95. I believe that I bring both experience. I have worked in the legislature as both a lobbyist, a staff person, and a legislator. I know how it works. I consider myself to be very able and very interested in working across the aisle and know how to make that happen. And so I think I'm an effective representative for you in the district and in Missoula, and I really appreciate your support. Contact me if you have questions or things that you'd like to see happen. I appreciate it.
I want to thank you for coming. I want to thank all the candidates that have appeared on these interviews and some of them that couldn't make it. Campaigning is an arduous enterprise. It's tireless and it is tiring and often thankless and contentious. And for your reward, if you win, you get to go to the battlefield of Helena and work 6 days.
But we only go if you go out and vote. You can vote absentee. You can vote any day at your courthouse before the election now, and you can vote at the polling place. You have 3 choices. You have no excuse not to vote. Get out there and do it.
I was going to say get out and vote, but of course Representative Sands has beat me to that, and as the veteran in this room, I'm going to defer to her as making the ask to you, the all-important component of this entire election, which is to vote. Again, thank you. Thank you to the candidates. Thank you for running. Thank you for serving if you're elected. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.